In the early morning hours of April 18, 1942, as waves crashed against the steel hull of the USS Hornet, 16 B-25 Mitchell bombers sat lashed to its flight deck, an impossible sight by every known standard of military aviation. A chance encounter with a Japanese picket boat had just exposed Task Force 16, 650 miles from Japan, 250 miles farther than planned. With radio silence broken and detection confirmed, the decision was clear: launch immediately or abort the mission entirely. The order came at 6:20. Launch planes. The fate of the raid, and perhaps the entire course of the Pacific War, now rested on the wings of bombers never meant for carriers and pilots who had trained for the impossible. The Doolittle Raid was born not from superior firepower, but from necessity, audacity, and ingenuity. Following the devastating attack on Pearl Harbor, President Franklin D. Roosevelt demanded a strike on the Japanese homeland, not later, but now, while American morale still reeled and the Pacific seemed lost. The objective was psychological: prove to the enemy, and more importantly to the American people, that Japan was not untouchable. The plan was unconventional: Army bombers launching from a Navy carrier, and its risks were unprecedented. Lieutenant Colonel James Doolittle, a legendary aviator with an MIT doctorate and a cabinet of trophies, was selected to lead the mission. The B-25s, never designed for carrier operations, were heavily modified. Bomb sights replaced with handmade devices, turrets removed to save weight, and fuel tanks stuffed into every available space. These aircraft were stripped down and tuned up for one purpose: reach Japan, strike, and escape to China. The crews trained on impossibly short runways, gambling that wind, luck, and skill would get them airborne from a pitching deck into hostile skies. As dawn broke, Doolittle's bomber took off first, barely clearing the deck before dipping dangerously close to the waves and climbing into the gray Pacific. 15 more aircraft followed at 4-minute intervals, every launch a miracle. They flew low and fast, guided only by dead reckoning, magnetic compasses, and hope. There were no radio beacons, no escorts, and no second chances. By midday, the bombers reached Japan. Civilians waved from fishing boats, unaware that these low-flying planes were American. Doolittle dropped 4 500-pound incendiaries over Tokyo, igniting fires in the heart of the empire. Other crews struck industrial targets in Yokohama, Nagoya, and Kobe, causing minimal physical damage, but maximum psychological effect. The Japanese public, told they were invulnerable, now saw fire in the skies. Even Prime Minister Hideki Tojo witnessed one bomber pass close enough for eye contact. But reaching China proved far harder than hitting Japan. Fierce headwinds, fading fuel, and zero visibility turned the return journey into a desperate struggle. Some crews ditched in the sea. Others bailed out over mountainous terrain. A few were captured, 8 in total, facing torture, starvation, and execution. 3 were shot by firing squad. 1 died in captivity. The rest were rescued or aided by Chinese civilians, who paid a terrible price. In a brutal campaign of retaliation, Japanese forces massacred an estimated 250,000 Chinese civilians suspected of helping the Americans. Every B-25 was lost. Yet, the mission was a strategic triumph. The raid forced Japan to recall fighter groups to defend the homeland, weakening their positions in the South Pacific. More critically, Admiral Yamamoto, humiliated by the attack, accelerated plans for the Battle of Midway, a rushed campaign that would end in disaster for the Japanese Navy. For fleet carriers were lost, along with hundreds of irreplaceable pilots. From that point on, the initiative in the Pacific shifted to the United States. Back home, Doolittle expected a court-martial for losing all his planes. Instead, he received the Medal of Honor and a promotion to Brigadier General. His men were celebrated as heroes. War bond sales surged. The American public, battered by months of defeat, now had proof that their nation could strike back. And the world saw that innovation, cooperation, and sheer willpower could achieve what was thought to be impossible. The Doolittle Raid forever changed military doctrine. It proved that aircraft carriers were not just tools of fleet defense but platforms of strategic reach. It paved the way for joint operations between Army and Navy forces. It inspired the development of skip bombing, strafer variants of the B-25, and the use of bombers in roles no one had dared imagine. But beyond tactics and technology, the raid delivered a message still relevant today: that courage matters more than numbers, that belief can outweigh calculation, and that sometimes a small group of determined individuals can shape the course of history. As Prince Takamatsu, brother to Emperor Hirohito, would later admit, "Your 16 planes changed our world. The ideas you dropped were devastating." Today, only fragments of those bombers remain, like a twisted piece of aluminum bearing the serial number 40 to 2267, recovered from a Chinese mountainside. Scarred by time, it carries the molecular residue of Tokyo's smoke, proof of an act that transcended bombs and borders. On that stormy April morning, 16 bombers lifted off into legend, carrying not just bombs and fuel, but the undeniable proof that in modern warfare, the impossible is merely difficult, and the difficult is merely Tuesday.